Welcome to Soltron. Today we're going to do a little bit of mods to Ratbat. I think there's one mod that I think is kind of essential. Like you kind of have to do it, otherwise I think this figure might actually end up breaking. And then the other one's like a little less essential. And then we'll talk about like everything I did for his little guitar here at the second half. But when I was reviewing this figure, I noticed that his thigh swivel was kind of broken. Like this one I fixed, so it has a nice smooth thigh swivel. It doesn't feel like anything's wrong. This one is still messed up. Like I can only turn it this much. When you turn it more than this, you definitely feel like you're forcing it, and you actually dislocate the leg if you turn it. And I actually know exactly why that happens now that I've taken it apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like turn this past where you're supposed to. And it definitely feels very bad. But that helps me wiggle it free, and you can even see we get some nice little stress marks in there that show that this joint is kind of starting to weaken up. And the reason that happens, I found out just by looking at it, is because of the way this like rectangular piece is shaped. This piece is actually a little bit too long, and you can kind of tell because when you seat this in here without putting it in all the way, you can actually feel, oh, look, I can't even turn this. And the joint's not even in all the way. And that's because this little corner here is blocking the joint from turning. So really easy fix today. All we need for these mods today is just a hobby knife, actually. We're just going to very gently shave just the very corner of this like hip block. So it has nothing to do with like any of this piece. This piece is all fine. All the problem is actually happening up here. So I just shaved off like that little corner right there. You could barely even see the difference, especially because it's black, but I did shave it. And then I'll just very loosely put this back on and test fit it and just make sure, oh, can I turn this? That's a little bit better, but it still doesn't feel quite right, so I'm gonna have to shave a little bit higher. So I just shaved. It's really hard to work with the shadows here. I just shaved like halfway up. I'm gonna shave a little bit higher up into like that pinhole basically. So I'm just gonna trim a little bit higher. And then when I cut things, I typically cut too much. I always like overdo it a little bit because I'm kind of impatient, but let's check that out. Okay, and that seems to be swinging nice and smooth now. And you can see you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You can see the purple plastic here, and it's basically rubbing right against the black plastic. Even though I just trimmed it, it's still rubbing right against it. So I could actually go a little bit deeper, but this is good enough. And now we can rotate his thigh. No excessive force needed. So easy fix. Everybody should do that before you crack that whole joint in there. Otherwise, just don't use his thigh swivel. So now we got two good thighs that are rotating just nicely. So I waited a whole week to do that mod, so I hope you appreciate that. And then the other fix I also talked about during the review is I had an issue with his ankle tilt. This one's fixed, so you can see it's rolling just fine. This ankle's still broken. You can see it'll hold this position just fine, but if I just barely touch it, it'll just click here. Like you can only get two positions. You can either get his flat foot or you can get it at this like 30-degree angle. You can't get anything in between. And if you actually look at his shin, you can see it's actually splitting. You can see, oh, look at that. It's like opening up like a 1/2 millimeter. And that's because there's friction at the top of this foot. The top of this foot is actually not correctly measured for the inside here. So there is actually a little problem there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop out this pin, and you can kind of tell by the way this pin goes in. It went in going this direction, so I need to actually tackle it from the inside here. So you can see or actually you can't see, but really deep in this shadow, you can actually see the other end of the pin in here when you're looking with your eyes. So I'm going to just shove that. I'm going to take the tip of my hobby knife, which is already super dull because I use it all the time, and I'm just going to shove that against the pin. And then I think I got it. It's kind of hard to tell. The lighting here is not the best. Okay, I had to cheat a little bit and do it with some overhead lighting because it's really hard to see in this shadow from any angle except for when the light is directly overhead. But you can see the pin has been pushed out a little bit. So I'm just going to use my hobby knife and just keep pushing that. And then you should be able to see it. You can see it comes out a little bit. Oh, and I lied. You actually do need one other tool. You can use this, or you can use cuticle nippers, which I like to use for various purposes if you've seen my other videos. But needle nose pliers should be able to pull this out. All right, and then we got the pin out. So now we can get a better look at what's going on here. So what's causing the friction is actually the top of this foot here should be more rounded. So I'm just going to round that out a little bit. And then I'm also going to carve out a little bit of this inside of his foot where the top of the foot, or the inside of the shin where the top of the foot would be rubbing against. And you can see even when it's not pinned, you can still see it spreading the plastic. So I'm just going to take my hobby knife and I'm just going to start shaving down. And this is like this is not really like an important mod to do, but it's pretty easy. And you're not really going to see all this cut up plastic because it's all going to be hidden inside the shin anyway. So it doesn't really matter that much if you mess it up a little bit. I'm just going to clean up some of this plastic, and then the top of the foot here seems to be where the biggest problem is. So I'm just going to take some of that material away just to clean it up, and then I can refit it and see. And now you can see when I rotate the foot, look at that, his shin isn't splitting anymore. I'm still feeling some friction on the plastic against plastic, so I'm going to cut up just a little piece of the inside of his shin here, just to make sure that there's no friction and his ankles are nice and loose and rotating without hitting any plastic. And that feels pretty good. I still feel a little bit of contact. So I'm just going to carve up a little bit more of this. And of course, like, it's up to you what you're comfortable with. You could definitely do this with just a little bit of friction or a little bit of carving. But I like to make sure that things feel nice and smooth. And I like to do it just like in the first pass and make sure I don't have to do it anymore. So I'm just going to carve out a lot of this plastic. Doesn't need to be here. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's kind of weird with all the plastic saving they're doing, and then they have all this plastic here that you can't even see. It's kind of pointless. It would have been a good place for them to save and maybe put that plastic somewhere else. Okay, so now we get a nice smooth transition there. So we're just going to take the pin. We're just going to put it in the reverse way of the way we got it out. Slide that in there. And then I like to use the tip of the pliers and just shove it in the rest of the way. And then we've got pivoting ankle with no obstruction. And then you can see you can get it in like an in-between pose. Like, of course, this makes almost no difference, but to me it makes a little bit of difference. So now we got his ankles. Now he can just put his ankles flat on the floor. We can have him in an in-between pose. If he wants to stand up correctly, we can get his thighs rotated out to give him more dynamic posing. And there you go. He's all fixed. Pretty simple. Okay, so let me show you this other thing that I made for this guy. So I made him a variable axe, which is of course a guitar. So I put a ball joint here. You can kind of see, well, actually I'll go over the parts later. I'll just show you what it can do. So here's the head of the guitar. We're just gonna pop that off, and then that's gonna slide into his open palm. And then we're just gonna rest this. His other arm is gonna go over the guitar, of course, and then we need to slide the head of the axe back on. And then his closed hand will go into this ball joint handle I made for him. And then there you go. Now he's got like guitar capability. That's like sticking in a weird way. All right, I just like the way it looks with it like angled a little bit more up. So maybe this arm should be angled a little bit more down, so it looks a little more like a natural playing pose. And then of course he can just like move this hand up and down the fret or the neck of the guitar. And then I think that looks pretty awesome. Like that looks like a really good guitar. And then we can take his friend Megatron, and then I gave Megatron the laser beak guitar, which looks pretty good on him, except for he can't rotate his hand, so he can't play it as well as Ratbat here. But I think that looks pretty good. These guitars look really good together. I do want to make this neck look more like a neck, but then he probably won't be able to hold it correctly, so I'm just going to leave it as these two little Technic axles from Lego. But yeah, they look like they're going to make a really good band. And then we can get the Armada Wheeljack, and he can be the drummer, of course. So we got a good Knights of Cybertron band. He can't really sit on anything or has any drums, but maybe someday. But yeah, I think these two ended up really good. Let's see. Oh, and that's not all. So let's see what else his axe can do. And actually, let's compare the two guitars while I have them both out. And yeah, I think the Ratbat guitar looks pretty good considering it's all scratch made. Of course, the Laserbeak guitar looks a lot cooler, but the Ratbat bass, the Rat bass looks pretty awesome too. Yeah, I just think both of them look pretty excellent. And then just because I have him, I might as well transform him into Laserbeak mode. So really cool Armada accessory. And then I gave him this handle in the back so he can be used as an axe as well, so he can be held like this way and pretend he's like an axe weapon. But anyway, so you can kind of do the same thing with this, like Ratbat can hold it with these handles as you saw already, and you could kind of pretend, oh, this is an axe, but that's kind of cheesy. So I want to make him like a better axe mode. So what we're going to do is we're just going to slide one of these. Actually, we got to slide this whole collar piece off. This just helps stabilize everything. It's not really necessary. And then we're going to just unpeg these. They're held together by this one axle. And then we're just going to slide this back on for storage. Well, actually, this is going to serve a purpose. Okay, so we slide that back on, and then we're going to just slide the other axe in there. And now we have a really cool double axe weapon that, of course, Ratbat can hold pretty much perfectly. So we're just going to, let's see, I don't want to do this. It's kind of unwieldy because it's so big, but let's just go ahead and put it in both of his hands. And then this kind of unpegs wherever I feel like it, so just to get his hand positions right. So now he's got this really menacing looking double axe weapon, and I like to have the top axe like pointed forward while the bottom axe is pointed down, and then you get like a pretty intimidating looking weapon. And these little gears that are on the shaft are just to help with his hand position so they're not so loose. They kind of friction against the hands. But yeah, I think this makes a pretty good double axe. It's very convincing. And then of course, maybe that's a little bit too complicated. We can just have him just unpeg, and now he's got two separate axes. And I also like to get his hands closer to the blades so they're not so gigantic. So we can just reposition and repeg the shafts here. So that would be now his hands like close to the blade, so it makes the whole thing look a little shorter. Here we go. Now he can dual wield his blades, and he's looking even more like a vampire, I think. That's pretty cool display option. And then you can see that he's got these little things. These are just keeping it from just rotating in his hands. If I remove this, it's just going to slide all over the place because they're not quite 5 millimeters. So it's hard to keep these in position, but these are nice, just friction in place, pretty easy solution. But yeah, that's how his blades work. And basically the way to take it apart is it comes off at this joint here. And we could just go ahead and take this out of his hand. And basically in his vehicle mode, this would just peg to the side of the vehicle, I guess. I haven't actually turned him into vehicle mode since I did this mod. And then same thing, we'll just take this one off this little shaft here. So now you got his two wing pieces. And then the other thing I did was I just dremeled out. Actually, I had to use the X-Acto knife. And I just cut this out with the knife just slowly and surely because it's the kind of plastic you can't Dremel. And then now this just pegs right back into the slot so it can still rotate. And then this one will just peg into the other side. So this one clips nicely into place, and you can still get all the different like cloak poses that I really enjoy. So you can still get that out of him. And then yeah, so no sacrifices had to be made except for putting this ugly ball joint right there, but I think that helps with guitar mode. And then he's got like these two extra shafts, which would ideally would basically just peg like right here and right here, but that's kind of ugly looking, so I'm going to find like another way of storing these. Like he's got so much cape kibble that there's got to be a way to just like set it inside this. But yeah, that's that custom. And then I guess for the last couple of minutes of this, I'll just go over like the recipe. What if you want to, for some reason, do this mod, which I'd be surprised if anyone wants to. We'll get him ready in his guitar pose. So the ingredient list is basically you need some of these Harry Potter wands. You need 2 of these. And then what I did was I just drilled like basically from here down to here, and then I just shoved them in, and I didn't have to do any glue or anything. Those are nice and tight. So that was like a 1/8 drill bit. So those fit kind of perfectly. And then I did the same thing here. I drilled a 1/8 bit, and that allowed me to just slot this ball joint in place. And then this is the handle or the clip of the tow bar. And then I had to like modify this axle and just glue it on here so that he has something to hold. And that's basically the body of the guitar. And then all these guitar bits are just made out of different Lego joints, so or different Technic pieces. So you get one of these and one of these, and that just allows the two to peg together so that it's not, so that these two halves can actually hold on to each other. And then the holes of these already grip onto the 3mm posts. So these are already made. You don't have to modify that. These already peg together with this system. And then I had to like modify this little extra piece